Wonderful. So welcome everyone to another one of our fireside chat sessions that we're having. We're delighted to have Miss Angela Chao join us from Austin, Texas, where it's an honor to be in her presence. I'd love to start off with introductions before we jump right into the agenda and logistics for the session. So my name is Zeel Patel. I'm the president of HPAIR, and I'm one of the students that's responsible for running these fireside chat sessions with heads of state, with business leaders, and with Harvard alumni that are really making an impact in the world today. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Ms. Angela Chao, who is the CEO of the Foremost Group, and more importantly, she's a Harvard College alum that graduated earlier, and she's was a proud resident of Adams House and also went to Harvard Business School right after. So she's been part of the Harvard ecosystem for quite a while. And if any of you have spent time like me studying at Harvard Business School, you'll know that the Chao Family Center was a generous gift donated by Ms. Angela Chao and her family. So we're very grateful to have her here and to have her be supporting the Harvard ecosystem, not just through the Chao Family Center, but through a plethora of scholarships and all of the other exciting work that she does in philanthropy, both in healthcare and in education and in the fine arts. So thank you, Angela, for being here and taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's actually my honor to be with you guys. I know how many demands that you guys have on your time. You know, you just got out of Thanksgiving break. You're going to get into reading period next week. And so thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Angela. And especially with everything going virtual, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with the students since they're scattered all over the world. Just for some quick statistics for the audience, we have 309 students that are on the call. They're calling in from time zones ranging from Singapore all the way to Germany. So it's really quite the crowd here. And these are students from HBS, HKS, and the college. So thank you all for coming. Wonderful. So let's dive right into it. So Angela, we've got quite a bit of topics to cover. I'd love to jump into your personal background first, but then also some of the familial values and the extraordinary parents that you had growing up and the influence that they had on your life and on philanthropy at large. And then dive into some of your work with the Foremost Group and the philanthropies that you're a part of and helping with. And then lastly, just to chat about some social issues before we open it up to the audience. And to each of the audience members in attendance, please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A. Our team will be submitting them up to me to ask Angela directly, and we'll begin answering these questions at about the half-an-hour mark. So you can continue to add questions in as you please. Perfect. So Angela, I'd love to begin just by speaking about your personal background. So I know you attended Harvard College and HBS, and you drew quite a bit of lessons when you were there. You completed the advanced standing program and did Harvard College in 3 years, which is becoming more and more of the norm now, actually. And I wanted to ask, what were some of the lessons that you drew from your Harvard experience, and how do you think they've sort of shaped and helped you in your career today?
Well, thank you again. Before I launch into those answers, I just wanted to give one thank you also to your advisor, Leslie Go, who recommended me to be a speaker here today. She's fantastic. And I'm sure you've had her speak because her life story is really quite incredible and very inspiring.
Exactly.
And I also want to thank you because you've done a lot of research on this. You've made great arrangements today. And for your audience, I don't know if you know, but Zeel invented a $7 artery screening test when he was 16 years old. I mean, incredible, just incredible.
My Facebook messages are going to blow up after this.
I think, you guys are just so lucky to be around such wonderful, wonderful, amazing people. So really treasure this time. So by way of background, you already talked about how I was Harvard undergrad and Adams House, which was very cool at the time. It was a great house. I hear it needs some renovations now, but stays close to my heart. And then, of course, I went to HBS. And I just loved my experiences at Harvard because they just broaden your horizons. They give you this perspective and they give you these exposures that, very few people actually get to see. And so I loved having this ability to stretch my mind and see more things. And you take for granted right now just how impressive and amazing the people that sit next to you every day are.
Right.
I mean, you're going to go in life, later in life, you're going to continually reflect upon and appreciate all of your Harvard friends. The late nights, the
right.
the pizza runs, All those things that you do as a college student, but you're going to reflect on those times and really treasure them, because not only are you learning from your students so much, you're going to learn as much, if not more, from your fellow students than you are from the classrooms. But they also become your lifelong friends.
Right.
It's a really amazing journey that way. So when I came to Harvard, I first, I did decide to do advanced standing, but I fell in love with an art course. So the first year I took an art course in the Baroque art period by Simon Schama, who is no longer,
Oh, yes.
but is an amazing professor, has written really amazing books. And I fell in love with the subject. I thought, this is where I'm going to go. I'm going to be an art history major, concentrator. And I was really excited about that. And I remember talking to my parents. My parents said, well, that's wonderful. Art is very important.
Right.
But you have to be self-reliant and financially independent.
Right.
Our inheritance to you is your education. So you have to choose something that you can live off of, that is self-sustaining. And so I ultimately chose economics with a very strong bent in women's studies.
Right.
But I still love and had a passion for the arts, and I still kept it as a very important interest in my life, and one that continued to grow. I think that in terms of advanced standing, unlike you, who's staying a fourth year to do his master's degree, I'm quite ordinary, you see. I just went back, I graduated early, but part of that was because I was the last of 6 daughters.
Right.
And I did feel that I had a responsibility to go back to the company and learn from my father.
Right.
So one of our family traditions is that I was lucky enough that my parents paid for my college tuition. But one of the ways we had to pay it back was by working with a family company for 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I did investment banking straight out of college. Again, capitalizing on my economics degree, but then eventually had to go back and do my 2 years, which I did after my 2-year investment banking analyst program. And I came back to the company. And that's when I really fell in love with the company. And so, life is going to give you all sorts of twists and turns. And I think what's most important and valuable about the Harvard experience is that broadening of horizons. So one of the things that I really, really loved about my Harvard education and experience was your general education courses.
Yeah.
Back in my day, we called them core curriculum, but I think nowadays they call them general education. And I know that they seem kind of like a pain, and they're, you have to take courses that you wouldn't necessarily have chosen.
Yep.
But I totally remember those. But I have to say, some of those courses were the most important courses I took. My love for opera today came from a core curriculum opera course I had to take.
Wow.
And that was the foundation for why I love opera today. And so I think a lot of these courses just give you different perspectives on how to see things, how to view things, how to experience things. And so enjoy it, savor it. You're not going to get spoon-fed this education the way that you are right now. And then the fact that you're surrounded by some of the most amazing people on this planet in your age group is incredible. And so have fun, explore, ask questions, cultivate your interests, learn from your fellow students, because they all have a lot to teach you, and you all have a lot to teach one another.
Right. Thank you for the insight there. It's also incredible just how aware you are of the Harvard experience and able to draw on specifics, even after having spent so much time after graduation. But what I found really interesting there was you mentioned sort of the springboard that you went in after graduation and how you were thinking of working at Foremost after, but then the time you spent in investment banking and sampling and exploring classes. And I think this is important because a lot of students are going through this right now with all of the uncertainty that's going on. There's a lot of uncertainty around our career choices and how we should think about spending time after graduation, especially with this incredible privilege that we've had with the Harvard education. And so I'd love for you to share some of the wisdom that you've gathered for how to make these choices choices and make especially risky choices when it comes to graduating, since careers in public service and philanthropy, or even in startups per se, are not generally that attractive, since, as you mentioned, there's a financial risk at the start. But how would you recommend people think about that long term?
Oh, that's a really great question. And for every single person, it's going to be different. Everybody has different priorities, and everybody has different financial situations. As I mentioned in mine, for me, when I graduated from college, my parents said, "You are self-reliant. We are not supporting you anymore." And so that closed off certain opportunities for me, right? I mean, there are certain things that I just couldn't do if I had to live on my own and feed myself. And that's okay. You know, I actually very much appreciate my parents for giving me that kind of self-reliance. And that's not to say that you can't make decisions later in life that, you know, change some of those priorities. I think you guys have so many choices now.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's actually harder. You know, when I was going through school, basically you did investment banking or consulting. Maybe you did some marketing, you know, at a P&G or something like that. But Office of Career Services was super narrow, right? And we also didn't have the examples that we have today of like the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world and the Bill Gateses of the world, even though of course Bill Gates is older than I am, but you know, still the examples of such extraordinary success today are different from what they were when I was growing up. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on these students today and just young people in general. And so I think one of the things that I think is important is something that my parents always taught me, which is don't compare yourself to others. Just compare yourself to yourself. Just try to improve every day. Improve yourself as a person every day. And also that, you know, the world is a big, bright place, and there's a lot of things to learn. And so I think a lot of times people say, "Oh, follow your passions," which I think is, you know, a wonderful thing to say, but it's also incredibly hard. If you're 17 years old or 19 years old, how do you know what your passions are? I mean, I was still exploring things. I was still learning things. I was still, you know, there were things that I'm passionate about now that I had no idea about, you know, 25 years ago. So I think continually allowing yourself to explore and broaden your horizons, expose yourself to more people, to different situations, I think is really important in that journey. Because I think another thing that's really important about life is it's a journey. It's not a destination. And so, you know, early success is not necessarily a blessing. I think it can be really hard. And also you don't have, or you might not have the maturity or the wisdom to deal with the success or even appreciate the success. You know, so my parents came to this country in 1958. My dad was already 38 years old when he had to start all over again. And I know you guys in the audience are thinking, "Oh my gosh, 38, I'm going to have it, you know, I'll have it all figured out by then. And my life is going to be set." And so I think it's really heartening and reassuring to know that someone like my father, who I consider a huge success, and not about material wealth, but because he is a wonderful, wise person that has mentored so many people over the years and has inspired so many people over the years. And I hope that we, as you know, his daughters, were good representatives of what my parents' values are. I think he's a success because of all those things. And he started at 38 from scratch. You know, the only money he had in his pocket when he came to this country was borrowed. So he was already in debt coming here. And he made it. You know, it took a little bit longer, of course. But the thing that he says now as a 93-year-old, and I still speak to my father every day just to check in on him, because especially with COVID now, I can't be with him, is, you know, all those little successes, all those little accomplishments along the way, things that your audience, you in the audience, I wish I could see you guys, but I think things that you guys take for granted. You would think, you're like, "Oh, that wouldn't even be a success," because your standards for success are so much higher already. But it's those little things that my parents really savored when they were saving dollar by dollar, brick by brick, step by step. It's all of those cumulative experiences that they look back at now. And I lost my mother on August 2nd, 2007. But those were the things that they most treasured. It actually isn't where they got to today or, you know, late in my mother's life, but it's all of those early stories, all of those early struggles that are so heartwarming and actually created the most satisfaction for them. So I think it's
Right.
important as you remember this, think about, what do you want to be in 10 years? And I don't mean in career. I mean, what kind of person do you want to be in 10 years from now?
Right.
And if you're always thinking about what kind of person you want to be, you'll find actually that there are many paths to get there.
Yeah.
And you can take, a lot of different choices. As long as you're working towards what that person you want to be looks like, you will find the journey a lot more satisfying. And I think you'll find the destination a lot more satisfying as well.
Wow. Thank you, Angela, for the lessons and sharing the insight there. You actually mentioned your parents, which I think is what I wanted to jump into next. Their story is extraordinary. Like, I had the chance to really dive deep into it. And I must say, there's very few symbols of upward mobility that I've seen in America that are as exciting as your parents. And I wanted to dive deep into that because, especially with the conversation going on right now, nationally and on campus, of the American dream fading and if upward mobility is really there, I think your parents are still a beacon of that. And what I wanted to learn more about was sort of the influence that they had on you growing up and how that shaped your values, the lessons that you drew, and your worldview. And after the passing of your mother in 2007, if that changed your perspective on how you viewed the world as well.
Yeah, so thank you for that. It's funny, for the benefit of the audience again, Zeal was kind enough to send me some kind of sample questions before we started this over the weekend, just to give me an idea of what kind of thread you would be going on. And my feedback to Zeal was actually, if you don't mind, if you could ask some questions about my parents and the values that they tried to instill in us, I think that would be really wonderful, because if, anything that I would say that is worth listening to, I've learned from my parents.
Wow.
And so thank you for that, because they really lived extraordinary, and my father still lives an extraordinary life. So my father's 93 and he's writing another book. Like, it's not like he thinks COVID is a time for him to just relax or chill out or something. He's always got a project, and he's always trying to share his experiences. So my parents have so many life lessons. One is that the way they lived their lives. You talk about the upward mobility, and I do think that my parents are a wonderful example of the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times the American dream is still linked to wealth.
Right. And
I think one thing about my parents is that when we were growing up, even though the economic situation was getting more stable, and my father had paid back the debt that he had, when he first came to this country, that kind of thing, because I'm the last of 6, remember?
Yeah.
My parents were never concerned, or they never talked to us about the financial or material wealth. It was much more spiritual, and it was much more about, what can you contribute back to society?
Right.
What can you do to be a productive member of society? So first you had to be a productive member, so then you had something to give back to society. And again, this is not about wealth, it's about time, it's about care, it's about empathy, it's about giving back in a larger sense, and in trying to make the world a better place in your small little way. I think Silicon Valley has blown that up to, this enormous proportion of, like, I'm going to make the world a better place. And yes, we all should be trying to, but it's not because you built some enormous company or something. Sometimes a simple hello to a stranger, a kindness. These things also are the fabric of our society and communities. And those are really, really important. My parents are incredibly optimistic, positive people who are grateful all the time. We just grew up always being grateful for things, never taking things for granted, being grateful for the kindnesses of others. So one of the things that my parents always talked to us about was, when they first came to this country, or in the early days, and during those early days of struggle, the small kindnesses of people and the help that people gave. And I'm sure to many of these people, they wouldn't even remember the one sentence of advice that they gave my father,
Right.
or, the helping of the grocery bag when my mother's back was killing her because of all the kids. These things that they always remembered, like, wow, thank you. And just to let that fill your spiritual cup as well, and to fill your heart with things that you can give back. Because my father also always said, you have to fill your own heart before you can give to others. So you have to create a strong foundation for yourself. You have to be a happy person. You have to be a productive person. And then you can give back, and you can give back meaningfully. So I think that was really important. Working hard was, of course, part of the equation. But my parents also told us, working hard is not going to get you success. It's a prerequisite, but it's not a guarantee. So sometimes you're going to work hard and you're not going to get what you want, or you're not going to reach the goal that you set. But that's okay. You have to try again. And also that failure was important.
Right.
Because if you're not failing, then you're not stretching yourself and you're not testing yourself the way that you need to. And so you do have to fail every once in a while to make sure that you're reaching and that you're improving and that you're stretching yourself. I talked about some of the other things, like life is a journey, just remembering all the wonderful things along the way, because I'm telling you, you guys are all going to be successful and you're all going to get to some place and you're going to be like, so what? Really? I worked all this time to get here and it's great and all, but you're actually going to appreciate all the little, like the first time you got into the room, like you didn't have to say anything. You just got into the room. You're like, wow, I'm so excited to be in the room, right? So it's these little things along the way that you should just always remember to savor and appreciate. And also, by savoring and appreciating it, you can share it with others and you can bring others along. And I think that's part of what our job is, right? Our job is, we stand on the shoulders of others before us, and we hope to have shoulders strong enough for others to stand on us afterwards.
Wow.
So we are creating paths, and we are creating opportunities, and we're creating those new roads.
Wow.
Oh, and can I make one more comment?
Yes.
I can go on and on and on about things that my parents have taught. Pick the right partner. So this is something, I'm not saying this as a woman. Actually, it's funny. My father has recently finished 2 biographies. One for my mother. So as I said, my parents were married almost 58 years. They were soulmates.
Wow.
And after my mother passed on August 2nd, 2007, my father continues to try to honor her in many different ways. And the Chao Center is actually named after my mother. It's not actually after our family. It's the Ruth Mulanchu Chao Center. My father was very intentional about wanting to honor her. And it's the only building on the entire Harvard campus named after a woman, believe it or not.
Wow, I think that's true. Wow.
So
strange.
It's very strange. So as my father was writing my mother's memoirs, and he did a companion to that of his own, he reflects more and more about the incredible life that he shared with my mother. And he's very appreciative of all the love and support that my mother gave him. And so one of the themes that continues to come out in his talks about the biographies and about my mother is picking the right partner, picking somebody who is going to grow with you.
Right.
All of you guys are going to look great on paper, but that doesn't mean that you're a good match.
Right.
It's about finding the right person who has the same values as you do, and not about what your 5 and 10-year plan is and whether he or she
fits in that,
coincides with that, right? But it's actually more about, do you have the same values so that when you encounter difficulties in life, and life will throw you, different loops, that you can actually get through it the same way. Because my parents, they met when they were like 17 and 19 years old.
Wow.
And what did life throw at them? Foreign invasion, civil war, pandemic, epidemic. I mean, they saw it all. They moved
Right.
to the United States. My mother was 7 months pregnant with their third child, and they were separated for almost 3 years. So these are things you can't plan for. But they had this rock solid, one, of course, love, two, faith in one another, but three, a value system of what was important. And that's how they were able to get through it all.
Wow. Right. I think that love and how it sort of guided everything for your father and as an effect, you as the sisters, is really extraordinary. And one of the things that I really appreciate that you highlighted was how people should appreciate all the little things, as like in your parents' early days, the generous acts of kindness and the thank yous. I think that's important to us as students because we don't have the wealth to do disproportionate things or have a sizable impact in philanthropy or things like that. But I think people forget that it's the little things that compound over time. So thank you for sharing that. And I think this is perfect because I wanted to jump into philanthropy, both with you as part of the Chao Family Foundation and the Foremost Foundation, and the issues that you sort of picked. So I know you personally think a lot about healthcare around the world and education and access to education and how to make it equal. And what I really wanted to ask was, these are both complex system-wide problems where there's a lot of stakeholders, a lot of misaligned incentives, and a clear need for philanthropic intervention. And so what I wanted to understand was why you picked these problems and why they're important to you, and how you actually go about like measuring success and measuring impact and knowing that the things that you do are actually contributing to society there.
Yeah, that's another great question. And it's not a simple answer, as you can imagine. Let me start with education. So education is so important and fundamental to my parents' philosophical thinking because it is a core foundational building block, right? My parents believe in the transformational power of education. And so again, when you look back at their lives, they lost everything twice, right? So my mother lost everything when she went from China to Taiwan, and then she got married to my father, or my father got married to her, and they lost, they had to start again in the US. So what's the one thing you can take with you? Education, right? Education allows you to start again. And starting again is not easy. And it's also, not a foregone conclusion that you can. But one thing that you definitely need is an education. And so my father, the socioeconomic backgrounds of my parents was actually quite different.
Yeah.
So my mother was really fortunate that she came from a family that was relatively comfortable and believed in education for women, which was not necessarily something that was widespread at the time. Right. So my mother went to a very famous high school in Nanjing. And she had so she has had a great education. And again, that was uncommon for the time that her parents would invest that way. My father, on the other hand, also came from a family with huge educational values, but had lost so much, particularly during the Sino-Japanese invasion.
Yes.
So he actually was the beneficiary of many scholarships from middle school and high school on. And so coming from two very different perspectives, but with the same value system, my parents believed that there's so many bright young people in this world that can make huge contributions to society and can make our world a better place. So we have to give them the opportunity and access to education so they can fulfill their potential. Right. And they can make their contributions to society. And so that's why that has been such an important linchpin. The healthcare came actually after my mother's passing, towards the end of my mother's life. And that's because my parents had always known this, but of course it really came home with my mother's illness, that you have nothing without your health, right? Right. So if you're not healthy, you can't do the things and you can't be productive the way you want to be. Right. And that's why healthcare came into it. And you're right, there's so many great causes out there. And it's really hard to know what to do and where to go and how to make an impact. And I think this is where some Harvard and Harvard Business School really shine. And that's that leadership matters.
Right.
When you have a leader that wants to make a difference, those are the organizations that we normally tend to go towards, because many organizations have beautiful mission statements, but very little implementation, right?
Yeah.
So you do need leadership at the top that can drive change forward. And so, all the undergraduates, the HKS, the HBS students I mean, you're going to be the future leaders of the world. And good luck to you, and thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to highlight here something that I think is important. Angela mentioned how her father was on scholarships and how that helped him through his education. And the Chao family also gives back in the form of the Chao Scholars at HBS and also the Chao Scholarship at the college. So it seems to be a cycle that's repeating over and over again for the next generation, which we're very grateful for. I wanted to jump in next into your work with the Foremost Group, of which you are the CEO and leading right now in a very crazy time for the shipping industry as well. And one thing that I wanted to ask was, you have a clear focus on an environmentally friendly operations with Foremost. And I think this is extraordinarily important right now with the notion around climate change and how people need to be working towards it and the fact that we have a deadline. And so I'd love for you to take the chance to sort of share some of the things that you're doing at the Foremost Group that highlight this emphasis on environmentally friendly practices and why they're so important to you. And also how you do them well in business, because I know there's often trade-offs of profit and in the environment.
Yes. So I have to, again, give credit to my parents on this. My parents were ahead of their time. Like, even before recycling, my parents recycled. Like little things like that. And I also remember being on the highway with my parents. We would go visit my grandmother in Connecticut, and we used to take the car ride. And I remember my parents would comment about things on the highway, in the divider, like junk.
Really?
And be like, we used to reuse that stuff, or somebody would have gotten that and then repurposed it for something. And they would reflect and say, wow, what a wealthy country America is, that they can just work this out.
Yeah.
So when you come from a different background, recycling is actually much more part of your DNA. So my parents recycled before, we had recycling programs. My father fixed things around the house and reused things all the time. So at Foremost, we have always been actually on the forefront of environmentally sustainable technologies. And it isn't always rewarded, as you mentioned,
right. Yeah.
But we try to take a long-term view, and we do take a long-term view. And thankfully, actually, number one, we always want to be on the right side of history. And
right.
Thank goodness that over the last 20 years, history has come to, the trend has come towards us.
Right.
Yeah. And so while, we have first-class clients that also care about the environment and our different technologies, you are right. For quite a few years, it didn't necessarily help our bottom line.
Right.
But we live on this earth together. And my father and my mother always felt we had responsibility to it. And thankfully, we are private, so we are not subject to the same kind of market vicissitudes, as well as, outside quarterly earnings.
And the scrutiny. Yeah.
And so we were able to make the right long-term decisions. And I'm really proud to be able to say that we didn't. They're fun too, right? Technology is fun. Like learning how to make things more efficient is fun.
Right.
And so it adds another element of something really interesting, because shipping is often considered a very traditional, old-fashioned industry. But then when you add in all the different technologies that we're now, employing and deploying, it makes it a lot more fun too.
Exactly. And for those in the audience who don't know, Foremost is actually the highest valued dry bulk shipper in the US. That's based out of New York City. And what I wanted to ask was, when people think about the shipping industry, especially people at Harvard, it's not seen as one where there's a lot of disruptive innovation or things that are changing all the time. And that's often just from a first order insight. But when I actually read into it, that's certainly not true. There's a lot that's changing. It's become far more efficient, far more environmentally conscious, and different things like that. So I'd love for you to share some of the technologies that are up and coming in the shipping industry and the trends that you're looking to capitalize on, and how Foremost is trying to be a part of that.
So shipping is actually one of the oldest industries in the world, international shipping. We're actually the first industry that had international law, because obviously you were trading across boundaries, right? Wow. So shipping in some ways it's been on the forefront, and in other ways, of course, not. So we have been investing a lot in different technologies that some are marginal, some are disruptive, some, we're still waiting to see. Right. But I think what's important is that we don't always look for the disruptive technology.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful when we can find it and we can do something and make a big leap step, but that every day we can make a difference too.
Right.
And we shouldn't forget the small steps that get you to the bigger steps, because it's hard to make those big steps without doing the small steps too. And they can go lock and step, they can go in parallel. And so we invest in technologies that we can utilize today. So reducing bunker consumption, using technologies to clean the water before it gets discharged back into the ocean, things like that. And then we're also looking into what's the alternative fuel of the future.
Right. Yeah.
It's a much bigger question for the entire world. Like, we're all dealing with that, right?
Huh.
So we're doing both in parallel. And again, it's an interesting world out there. And I think it'll be really fun to see in 10, 15 years. I think things are going to look different.
Right. And I'm excited to see this. I want to see how it changes over time. And so thank you for sort of driving this change forward. Before we jump into the audience Q&A for the last 17 minutes, I did want to ask a question that I think is extraordinarily important and isn't talked about enough, which is females in senior leadership, both when it comes to government and public policy, but also private corporations. While the world is changing more towards shifting and recognizing these disparities that have existed over time, I'd love for you to share some of your thoughts as someone who is leading a very large private corporation and has gone through that period of upward mobility. What lessons you've drawn and what advice you could give to the many young females that are in this room of Harvard College and HBS that are looking to sort of replicate your path.
Well, first I'd say don't be limited by my path. Your
right.
Your way, are limitless. But this is obviously something near and dear to my heart, because not only, is it about me, but I'm from a family of 6 daughters. Mm-hmm. So women empowerment is an incredibly important topic for all of us. And quite frankly, it's an important topic for the world. We are 50% of the world's population.
Yeah.
So we have so much to contribute. And so to all the women out there, a special shout out to you, go for it. I honestly think women are amazing. We should be ruling the world, and don't hold yourself back. Go for it. Don't let anyone else hold you back. Have confidence and be part of the solution, because you all have the foundation to do so. And I can't wait to hear what you guys are going to do.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I'd love to open it up to the audience Q&A now that we have. So the first question we have comes from Jane Lee, who's from Singapore. She's a 3rd year at the college studying physics. And she asks, I'm very curious, why did your father choose to name the company Foremost Group? What is the origin behind the name, and what does it mean, if there's any special meaning?
That's super sweet. By the way, thank you so much for doing this at like 2 a.m. for you. Or
yeah,
I mean, that's quite incredible. So I'm glad you got your question in, because you deserve it for those extra bonus points. So my father just picked Foremost because it had a good meaning. It was foremost. He didn't want to say he was the best. Mm-hmm. He wanted to be on the forefront. And my father never wanted to be the biggest. He just wanted to be the best. But you can't say best company. That's kind of obnoxious.
Yeah.
So Foremost was, a nicer way.
A polite way to say it.
A polite way to say that he did want to be, he wanted to be good at what he did. And he wanted people to recognize him, not because he was the biggest, but because he gave the best performance. And I think that's really important in, everything that we do. Like my father and my mother always said, we are a service industry. We get goods around the world. We feed the world, we build the world. That's our service to the world. And so that's what we're supposed to do. That's our job. So it's always about service.
Wow. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I don't think that was public, so I love learning that. Our next question comes from Mark Shu, who's calling in from San Francisco, California. He's a student at Harvard Business School, a second year MBA, and he asks, I noticed that you're part of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and also the Metropolitan Opera, and you sit on the boards. And he asks, why did you choose to sort of spend this time in the fine arts, and how has fine arts played a role in sort of your life and your passions all throughout, since you mentioned it at the start?
Yeah, so for me, the arts give me a different perspective on things. I think a lot of times we can kind of be tunnel vision, especially, you guys are still at Harvard and Business School and HKS, so you're surrounded by these amazing people and different ideas and different environments, and you can hear a lot of different speakers. But as you get older, actually, your circles become smaller because, you have families and you have jobs to get to. You just have, less exposure, and you have to work at it, to be honest with you, which is a wonderful thing. So for me, the visual arts and the performing arts, it gives you a different lens through which to see things, to experience things. It helps me with mindfulness, because I think, you can sit there and you can just walk through the museum, or you can really look at a painting. Yeah. Or you can sleep through the opera, or you can really listen. And you can pretend, for instance, okay, I'm not going to read the libretto. Let me just listen. Can I hear the emotion? Is this a happy song or is this a sad song? Well, and it just helps you, I think, stay mindful and also be a better listener. I think listening is a trait that is not appreciated as much as it should be in our culture. Yeah. And I always try to be a better listener, because when I'm a better listener, I'm a better leader.
Right. Well, that makes sense. Thank you. Our next question comes from Fabio Pruneri, who's a freshman and is currently living at Harvard College. So I'm assuming they stayed after Thanksgiving because of an extension. And he asks, where do you get most of your learning from now that you graduated college? Do you learn mostly from other people, or is it books, or what is sort of driving that learning for you now?
Another great question. So I still consider myself a student. I think it's a privilege to be a student and to be a learner of things. And I think that I try to learn, every day, and from a multitude of sources. So I am lucky that I graduated from Harvard College and I went to Harvard Business School. So I have a bunch of really smart friends who I still learn from, and we're all in different fields. But yeah, actually, a lot of times the people that are in the different fields are the ones that you can learn the most from, because it, again, gives you a different perspective, gives you a different insight, gives you a different way of seeing, which I think is really, really important in our world today. I read a lot of books. I listen to podcasts. I surround myself with also very, very smart family. I take edX. I totally did the Computer Science 101, or what is it called?
By David Malan?
I'm sorry. Yes, I did that online. It was awesome, by the way. It was super hard, especially towards the end, because you've got to keep up, and it was like, but again, I thought it was a really wonderful way to teach logical thinking. Like, you can't skip a step in coding, right? So it's a really wonderful reminder of discipline. I took the Chinese history course in great courses. So I just try to constantly find new sources. Going to the museum or going for a walk. I go to the park and I learn about different trees or indigenous plants, or I just I just try to stay curious and ask a lot of questions.
Wow. No, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important also to be a lifelong learner, like you mentioned. And I am shocked that you took the course with David Malin, because I'm a computer science, neuroscience concentrator, and I used to TF that class.
Oh
So
my God.
if I graded your paper, that's hilarious. Anyways, the next question here comes from Jared. And Jared's a third year at the college, and he asks, what is your favorite Harvard memory? And not necessarily academic, but just when you look back and you think Harvard years, what comes to mind?
Oh, I have to say, I have a lot of great memories in Adam's house.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys, I hear the tunnels are a little bit not so nice anymore.
No, they need work.
Yeah, they need work. So apparently they're going to be the next house. It's been a little bit delayed on the renovations.
It's being renovated right now, cleverly and all of them. Yeah.
Good. Because, it was awfully nice to have those tunnels in the winter. And, I don't know if you can still paint them.
You can, yep.
You can still paint them. And yeah, we had parties there too. So
wow.
Yeah, it was really, really fun.
Wait, before we get into this question, I'm so shocked. How do you know that Adams is being renovated? I feel like once you graduate, you're just so far removed. But I've been shocked by how much you still know about the Harvard ecosystem and so what's going on.
Well, I still stay close to the school because we have the scholarship students, and so I hear from them.
Right.
I have a niece there now, and yeah, I just try to stay informed.
That's very impressive, I must say. But yes, favorite Harvard memory, is it mostly all in Adams' house?
A lot in the Adams' house. Oh, another thing that I used to love that I don't know if they still do, but because you were talking about the arts, is when I was an undergraduate, you used to be able to go to the Fogg Art Museum there was a 1 or 2 week period in the beginning of the year where there were all these items they can't display, and you could go rent it for at my time, it was like $50 or $80 for the year. And it was like, I had a Warhol lithograph one year. I had Chagall. I don't know if they still do it. It's so funny because I remember I paid $50 for my Warhol, and I was going to get a bigger one, but I didn't want to spend $100. So I got the $50 one. But you could actually live with these works of art in your room.
Wow.
So I don't know if the Fogg still does that, but it's definitely worth looking into to be able to live with these beautiful pieces. Right.
So I didn't know they do that, but I'm looking at the messages coming in, and apparently they still do. So clearly I haven't explored this yet. But that's great. The next question we have is from Eric Lynn, who's a graduating senior at the college. And he says, does Foremost Group still take talent out of Harvard, or do you tend to recruit there? Or what are sort of the talent pipelines? Because prior to you, I had never heard of the Foremost Group and its relationship with Harvard.
So that's a great question. We usually have more maritime backgrounds that come into the company because we're a shipping company.
Right.
And so I was a little bit breaking the mold in that I was this liberal arts person that came into the company. And I have to tell you, it was not easy when I first joined, because first of all, I was young. I was a woman. I was the youngest daughter of the owner. So, I think I was met with a fair amount of skepticism. And so when I joined the company, I actually went on board the ships and met all the captains and chief engineers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I actually stayed on board the ships for 2 or 3 days each and had just followed the captain and the chief engineer around. Put on my hard hat, put on a boiler suit, and just where they went, I went. And I was, I just wanted to learn. I was able to ask a lot of silly questions. And I learned a great deal. And it's really nice to see a lot of those captains and chief engineers. They feel as though they kind of, saw me grow up.
Right.
Part of the Foremost kind of culture. And so, we don't recruit a lot out of Harvard undergrad, but maybe we should. So, as we continue to grow and expand, that's something that we should put on the table.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense on the background. So very fair. The last 2 questions we have before we end into closing remarks. The first one comes from Kush P. And Kush P is a sophomore at the college. And this is partly a very funny question. He asks, what is your advice when it comes to picking life partners? Because you mentioned this earlier. And how do you sort of choose who to spend your time with the most? So yeah.
I should have known that I would have gotten myself into this trouble. I guess I have to reiterate a little bit of what I said before, in that what it looks like on paper doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to fool people on paper as well. So finding somebody who you can genuinely love and who your love will only grow for. And that means also somebody that you can grow with, because as I mentioned before, you know, life will give you bumps, whether it's a health bump, whether it's your health, his health, her health, parents' health, sister's health, brother's health. I mean, you know, you lose your job, there's a stock market crash. There are lots of exogenous supply shocks and factors that you can't plan for. And so finding somebody that you want to weather the storms with, and who will see things the way that you do, in that you will get through the difficulties together. And that doesn't mean that he or she has to be identical to you, or, you know, you have to see things exactly the same. It just means that it's somebody whose perspective you can respect.
Right.
And so sometimes you do need somebody that says something or can show you something, and you're like, didn't think of it that way, but good point. I mean, that's actually the best, right?
Right.
And so, does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think it's great for me. I mean, I'm single, so if anyone's, no, I'm kidding. No. My mother would not be happy with that. The last question that we have coming in from the audience comes from Ashley Wong. And Ashley Wong is a junior calling in from Australia. And she asks, when you're thinking about philanthropy, should people think about pursuing this immediately after college or in the first few years? Or is this something where you necessarily feel you need a lot of wealth to have a sizable impact?
I do not think you need sizable wealth to make a big impact. And I think one thing that your generation has been great about, much better than my generation, and my generation is already better than previous generations, is that the social entrepreneurship and social impact that you all want to make at a much younger age is really wonderful. So in my generation, you know, a lot of people, unless you came from a very wealthy background, you had to make money, and then you could go into philanthropy.
Right.
So for instance, my father said to me, you know, you make your own money, then you can give it away. Like, you can't give away other people's money. You have to give away your money, right? So I think that's an important lesson too. But I think that nowadays, there's not the same emphasis on wealth as there used to be. And there's more emphasis that contribution is not just money. It's time, it's caring, it's making a difference, it's investing in people and in organizations. And so I think that's a big paradigm shift that I hope that generation will continue to on a path which you will continue on, because I think it's really important. We can throw money at problems and it doesn't solve it. Look where we are now, right?
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that, Angela. Before we wrap up the session, I just wanted to give you 2 to 3 minutes to sort of share any final words that you had with the Harvard students who are going through a reading period and exams over the next few weeks, and then facing the uncertainty of whether they'll be back on college or not for next semester, and all of the chaos there. So if you had any final words you wanted to share.
Well, one, thank you very, very much for having me. Two, I hope that the audience feels encouraged, I'm not saying inspired, but just encouraged and heartened by the fact that, you know, life is a long journey. And so I know you all are under so much pressure these days, you know, recruiting earlier now. I get it all. And you all are type A overachievers. That's how you got to Harvard. So I totally understand. But just give yourselves a break. And just remember to breathe and to enjoy, because you really are in a really special place in your life, and you're in a really special place with other people. And so be kind and make those friends, because those friendships will last forever and you will treasure them forever. And good luck. Remember me when I'm the, the old irrelevant one.
No, I don't think we'll ever hit that point, Angela. But with that, thank you so much for taking the time to come speak with all the students. I can't tell you how excited I was to have this session and to finally speak with you. Like I told Angela earlier, I have a lot of fond memories in the Chao Family Center. My favorite study spot on campus. I think anyone in the audience should explore it as well. But I just really appreciate you taking the time to speak with all of the students and share your insights. I know you mentioned that you didn't want it to seem inspiring, but I personally found it inspiring, and I'm sure a lot of the other students did too. So thank you, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me. Good luck, everybody. Good luck for reading period. And good luck in all of your wonderful, wonderful lives.
Thank you. And just a note for everyone in the audience, we have our session with Melinda Gates. That'll be happening right before Christmas. So that'll be December 21st. So be on the lookout for an email for that. But thank you. Thank you for attending. And thank you, Angela. It was delightful. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.